we are extremely honored here to have with us the President Artur Mas, President of the Government of Catalonia, who will present today on the Catalan political process. President Mas, thank you so much for honoring us with your presence at Columbia today. I'm delighted to welcome Professor Xavier Sala-i-Martin, who is Jerome and Matthew Grossman Professor of Development Economics at Columbia University, who will introduce President Mas. I'm also delighted to welcome my colleague, Professor Jose Moya, Professor of History at Barnard College and the Director of Columbia's Forum on Immigration. And he is going to moderate the question and answer session with the audience after President Mas's presentation. So Xavier, Jose, many thanks for joining us this evening, and I give the floor to you to introduce President Mas.
President Artur Mas, political authorities, colleagues, students, friends, everybody, welcome to Columbia University. On September 11th, 2012, 1.5 million Catalan people demonstrated along the roads of Catalonia by making a human chain, holding hand to hand from the northern border of France to the southern border of Valencia. Now, if this had happened in the United States and the chain had started here at Columbia University, the chain would have arrived at the Niagara Falls in Canada. 1 year later, about 1.8 million people demonstrated in the streets of Barcelona. Roughly half of them were wearing yellow shirts, the other half were wearing red shirts. The goal was to build the largest Catalan flag. As you know, the Catalan flag has 9 lines. Every line was about 5 people. So picture lines of 45 people, line after line after line, for about 10 miles. Drawing a giant V in the streets of Barcelona. If this had happened in New York City, the V would have started in front of Columbia University, along Broadway. Picture Broadway, full of people, all along Broadway, all the way down to the Empire State Building, and then coming back through Fifth Avenue, again all the way up to 116th Street. Now keep in mind that Catalonia has 7.5 million people. So 1.8 million people out of 7.5 million people is a lot of people. Now why did they demonstrate? Why did all these people demonstrate? Well, they demanded the right to decide their own future. They demanded the right to decide whether they wanted to continue to belong to Spain. Much like what happened 240 years ago in this country, where a bunch of people decided that they no longer wanted to be part of England, and they started an independence movement, which is very similar. The goals were very similar, and the reasons were very similar to the independence movement in Catalonia. The American movement was about taxes. Remember the Tea Party? It was about the right to make decisions. It was about respect. It was about life. It was about liberty, and it was about the pursuit of happiness. Unlike the American movement, however, the Catalan movement is completely peaceful. Completely peaceful. In these 2 demonstrations that I mentioned, and in many other demonstrations that have occurred through the years, not a single act of violence has occurred. Not a single glass has been broken. A very, very peaceful movement. Now, of course, against this movement, there is the mighty Spanish government. The Spanish government, the state, has not hesitated to use its mighty power, the legal power, the judiciary, the police, the propaganda machinery of the newspapers and TVs. Now, the people versus the government, it looks like the big battle between David and Goliath. The mighty state versus the tiny people, the strong versus the weak. Now, Malcolm Gladwell, in his latest book, called David and Goliath, tells us that the battle between David and Goliath is not what it first appears to be. The story of David and Goliath is usually the story of the weak versus the strong, and the weak wins. But David is not as weak as people think, and Goliath is not as strong as people think. The very reason why Goliath is such a big giant is that he had a brain tumor that actually, near the pituitary glands that make him very, very, very large, but also very, very, very blind. Okay, and he didn't see very well. David is not as weak as he first appears. Now, it looks like he's just a shepherd, with a sling. But 3,000 years ago, the slings were very, very powerful and precise instruments. And therefore, it is only normal that in the battle between a skillful slinger and a sick giant, the slinger will always win. Okay. Now, therefore, I continue to like the resemblance between this story and the story that we are living today in Catalonia. The mighty state of Spain is not as strong as most people think, and it suffers some of the problems that Goliath suffered. The nearsightedness. They think that this is a problem that will be solved in the courts. It's not. They think it's a legal problem. It's not a legal problem. You cannot put 1.8 million people in jail. This is a political problem, and it has to be solved politically. And David is not as weak as he first appears, for two reasons. Number one, 1.8 million enthusiastic people is a very, very, very strong force. But the second reason why David is a little bit stronger than it first appears is that its leader is called Artur Mas. Like David, Artur Mas is clever, is crafty, is astute, is brave, and he knows, to choose his weapons. And he's here today to talk to us about this problem. He's to talk to us about Catalonia at the crossroads. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce the 129th President of Catalonia, Mr. Artur Mas.
Well, it seems that David is going to give a speech. Professor Victoria de Gracia, Professor Xavier Sala-i-Martin, Professor José Moya. Good evening to all of you. Thank you for coming. It is a great honor for me to be at one of America's finest universities. I would like to thank Mr. François Carrel-Billiard and the staff of Columbia's European Institute for making this possible. I would also like to thank Columbia's own professor, Xavier Sala-i-Martin, who you may know is also a professor in Catalonia, for such a kind introduction. I'm grateful to Professor José Moya for moderating the discussions later on. Of course, I must thank the staff of Catalonia's delegation in the United States, who have worked so hard in the background to make today happen. As the title of my speech here tonight says, we have reached a crossroads in our long history. Your wonderful poet, Robert Frost, wrote one of his most famous poems about a crossroads. He talked of two roads diverging in a wood and taking the road less traveled, which made all the difference. This is a nice metaphor for the current situation in Catalonia, in my country. People will have to decide which road is better for the future of our 1,000-year-old nation. In a few months, the Catalan people will vote in a plebiscitary elections to decide if we stay in Spain or whether we move towards independence. Before talking specifically about that, however, I thought perhaps I should tell you a little about Catalonia. Many people in the United States have heard of Barcelona, our capital town. And I would say that any soccer fans here tonight may know about our Barcelona Football Club, including Professor Xavier Sala-i-Martin, one of the best teams in the world. I would say the best team in the world, but this is my personal opinion. Be absolutely free to have your personal opinions. This is my personal opinion. But let me say that not many Americans really know much, if anything, about my homeland. We are an ancient people, going back to the very origins of Europe, when Catalonia was joined with the core of Europe as part of the Carolingian Empire. Eventually, in the 9th century, we became a self-governing principality and a clearly identifiable Catalan culture developed by the 10th century, with our own language, the Catalan language, laws, and government. The parliamentary and constitutional system of Catalonia, dating from the 11th century, is one of the oldest in Europe, as old, if not older, than the English. Catalonia's government is called the Generalitat of Catalonia, and was created to limit the power of the monarchy and to collect taxes. That happened in the 14th century, more than 650 years ago. The first president of Catalonia was named in 1359, in the 14th century, as I said before. I have the honor of being, as Professor Sala-i-Martin said before, the 129th president of the Generalitat of Catalonia. There would have been even more presidents of Catalonia over the last 700 years had the Generalitat not been forcibly suspended for several centuries of our history. Strategically located in the northwest Mediterranean, Catalans also took advantage of their long coastline to go to sea and trade Catalonia's almonds, olive oil, wine, and fine textiles, coming to dominate a maritime empire that extended across the western Mediterranean. This empire was created not only by soldiers, but also by sailors, merchants, and philosophers, and a mentality to produce rather than to destroy. Later, Catalans went to the New World and beyond, and there is probably no country on earth today where you will not find a Catalan or two carrying out scientific research, running a company, teaching at a university, or saving lives as a doctor. We also have some world-class basketball players, as you know very well, Pau and Marc Gasol and others, who are helping out in your NBA. Let me say that there are three main factors that explain better than others the current reality of Catalonia. The first factor is our national, political, and cultural identity, forged in the Middle Ages. The second factor, the early industrial revolution carried out by Catalan entrepreneurs in the 18th and the 19th century, while the rest of Spain was basically a land of farmers and peasants. And the third factor, the large flows of immigration during the 20th century, which began with a huge influx of people from other regions of Spain who came to Catalonia, where there were plentiful jobs in our different industries. It has continued until today, to the point where 16.7% of our population comes from immigration from inside the European Union, with large numbers for the UK, Italy, Germany, France, and Romania, as well as from further away, with the largest numbers coming from Pakistan, China, Morocco, Bolivia, and Ecuador. They have been all welcomed and integrated into our multicultural society, making a huge contribution to our economy that, with an output of some $240 billion in goods and services, makes our economy larger than a dozen of the European Union's 28 member states. Catalonia's capital, Barcelona, rivals many of European capitals in size and surpasses many in terms of economy as well. As an example, we have 117 diplomatic consulates in Barcelona, behind only Hong Kong, Hamburg, and New York. In short, Catalonia and our capital, Barcelona, have the economy, size, and importance of many other European countries. We have never been a financial power or a military power, nor can we dominate demographically. We are only 7.5 million people, or with the power of great multinationals. Our power and survival have come through our creativity and our capacity to work hard. As you may know, we also have faced some hard times. One of the most difficult periods in our long history came after a year-long siege of Barcelona, ended with the surrender of our troops on 11 September 1714, when Catalonia was finally conquered by the Crown of Castile. Catalan attachment to its traditional institutions was so intense that resulted in a fierce defense that prompted the admiration of all Europe, with the European press of that time praising the Catalans for their love of liberty. You read before some parts of the Declaration of Independence of the United States of America, and you were referring to liberty as one of the main principles of the U.S. history. It is exactly also our case. In response to all that, Spanish King Philip V banned all of Catalonia's institutions, civil rights, and the ancient privileges of the Principality of Catalonia. In the first part of the 20th century, we fought hard to defend the Second Republic, which had restored our autonomy after more than 200 years, and the use of our language. Sadly, the Republic was defeated by the forces of General Franco during the Spanish Civil War, and a dark period of Catalan history began again. While all Spaniards were victims of Franco's ruthless and institutionalized violation of human rights, Catalonia suffered an additional cruel and systematic attempt at cultural annihilation. Once again, all regional powers were removed, and the Catalan language was made illegal. The Catalan government went to exile, but the Catalan president at that time was captured by the Gestapo, sent back to the fascist-controlled Spain, and in the end, executed. When the 40-year-long dictatorship finally ended in 1975, Spain surprised the world with a peaceful transition to democracy that shattered conventional wisdom, which was that dictatorships could only be overthrown by violence. But Spain is still a young democracy, and there are still some vestigial ticks from our pre-democratic past. Once the 40-year dictatorship ended, through the remainder of the 20th century, Catalonia had a tacit agreement with the Spanish state, with two overarching goals. The first one, the desire to democratize, Europeanize, and modernize Spain, and second goal, to develop more self-government with the necessary tools for managing Catalonia's own development. The first goal has been achieved. Spain is nowadays a member of the European Union since 1986 and has turned into a developed country despite the great challenges it faces after a 7-year severe recession. The second goal, Catalan self-government, is far from being achieved. As a matter of fact, we can talk about a strong process of recentralization of powers, taking advantage of the economic crisis and the absolute majority of the ruling Conservative Party in Spain. In the end, it is this lack of genuine autonomy, the inability to govern our own affairs, which has worn down support for the current settlement and set the stage for the growth of the current self-determination movement. To Catalans, self-government means, in the first place, having the competencies to protect and nurture our cultural patrimony and our centuries-old language. Catalan, as a language, is the largest language group in Europe without its own state, and yet one cannot address Spanish government institutions, even today, in any language other than Spanish, although the Catalan language is an official language in Catalonia, and theoretically it is specifically protected by the Spanish Constitution. And because Spain does not request it, Catalan is also not an official language in the European Union. Instead, the current Spanish Minister of Education declares publicly that Catalan children need Hispanization. In other words, they need to be more uniformly Spanish. And the school system incurs regular interventions by the central government, claiming bias against Spanish, even when all tests show that Catalan students are bilingual, and they even score better in Spanish than some autonomous communities who only use the Spanish language. This may seem like a distant or an esoteric issue to someone here in New York, but we would ask you to remember this is our own culture and language in our own land. A language which I dare say exists only because Catalans have tenaciously fought to keep it alive over the centuries and in spite of, rather than thanks to, Spanish institutions. On the economic front, our dream is to create the infrastructure necessary to make the Barcelona port one of the top container ports in Europe, as it already is for the cruise industry, and for it to serve as the top cargo hub from the Americas and Asia to the rest of Europe. We have a vision of Barcelona Airport, one of the most popular tourist and business destinations in the world, of becoming a truly transnational hub on par with Frankfurt or Milan, other non-capital hubs. We have a dream of implementing an industrial policy more properly to Catalonia's infrastructure and economy, and we dream of university reform to give our students what they deserve, one of the best educations in the world. And I can go on, but the important point is that to all these questions, the answer is the same. We cannot. We do not have control or competencies over our airports. The state still keeps a monopoly of control over our ports as well, ditto on industrial policy, as well as the university system. Our highly restrictive regional governance structure leaves minimal room for anything that Americas would recognize as real autonomy or real self-government. But let me be clear, I have not come here to complain. Rather, I have come to tell you about how and why we dream of a different future. We are aware that many on this earth are not as fortunate as we are, and that we have no problems of any developed world economy rather than the crushing poverty or war that many of our brothers and sisters suffer in other parts of the world. I know that, and believe me, we get that. At the same time, what we wish to explain is that Catalonia is a centuries-old nation whose citizens have every right to create, if the citizens of our country so democratically choose, a different social construct with different institutions and different priorities than their current state. But we explain some of the issues because we are also aware that when contemplating such an important step as creating a new state, we have a duty to explain, as America's founding fathers also made clear in their own Declaration of Independence in 1776, that a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. Please allow me then a few minutes to give you some context on our self-determination movement and our proposals for the coming months and years. Political analysts say the tipping point for Catalonia came in 2010, when Spain's Constitutional Court ruled as unconstitutional crucial portions of Catalonia's Statute of Autonomy. This Statute of Autonomy had already been approved by both the Spanish Parliament and the Catalan Parliament, and by a huge majority of Catalonia's citizens in a referendum. Many Catalans felt deeply betrayed. They had played by the rules and in good faith. Therefore, for many Catalans, the court's decision put an end to any speculation regarding the possibility of Catalonia progressing within Spain. The Constitutional Agreement of 1977, where we were to have home rule in exchange for loyalty to Spain, was literally shattered. The stripping of our autonomous powers led to a 1 million-person strong demonstration in July 2010 with the slogan, "We are a nation, we decide." That happened in July 2010, 5 years ago. This 1 million-person march has been followed by several others. Professor Sala-i-Martin were explaining to us some of these big movements in Catalonia. On Catalonia's National Day, September 11, 2012, as you said, some 1.5 million people, 1/5 of our population, marched through central Barcelona to demand that Catalonia become a new state in Europe. Once again, on September 11, 2013, 1.7 million Catalans of all ages, from every social strata and every corner of our land, joined hands peacefully in a remarkable 250-mile human chain that went from one end of Catalonia to the other, across hills, along beaches, fields, and rivers, to make it very clear that the Catalan people wanted to vote on Catalonia's political future. Then again, on September 11, 2014, last year, 1.8 million Catalans filled two of Barcelona's largest avenues from one end of the city to the other, wearing yellow and red shirts to form the stripes of the Catalan flag that stretched for miles and joined up at one end to form a gigantic V for vote, or some said for victory. These massive peaceful demonstrations were all organized by Catalan civil society groups. This is a very important point to remember. The members of these groups represent all different social classes, ages, and ideologies. They come from every corner of Catalonia and include Catalans who were born in Catalonia as well as others from around the world, some with Catalan as their first language, others with Spanish as their first language, or English, French, Urdu, Mandarin, Polish, or Arabic. They have all been welcomed and integrated into our society, and want also Catalonia's dream to be fulfilled. The independence movement started spontaneously at the grassroots level. Unlike what some have claimed, it was not the idea of a radical politician or an irresponsible political party. This process has come from the bottom up, and as the movement grew, the political parties realized that they had an obligation to fulfill the people's will to have a vote on their political future. At that stage, we felt we had three different options. The first one, to resign ourselves to the situation which most people didn't want. Second option, to try to change the Spanish Constitution. This is what we call in Spain the third way. That needs the support of 3/5 of the votes in the Spanish Parliament, and the current Spanish government has said they would block any attempt in this regard. So, nowadays, that is out of the question. In addition, you may take into consideration that the Catalan population accounts for only 16% of the overall Spanish population. So Catalans represent a minority within Spain. And third option, independence. This debate has been a top issue in Catalonia for years now, but unfortunately, the Spanish government refuses to even discuss the matter. I have made repeated requests to Prime Minister Rajoy to meet to discuss the situation, and he simply refuses to talk about it with me or anybody else. Also, it is important to point out that the plebiscitary elections are a last rather than a first resort. Prior to calling these elections, we have tried every legal and political route possible to an agreed referendum. In September 2012, the Catalan Parliament approved a motion with 65% in favor to formally ask the Spanish government to authorize a self-determination vote in Catalonia, as the British government did with Scotland. Our request was quickly denied, even though the majority in the Catalan Parliament in favor of a referendum was broader than the one in the Scottish Parliament. In January 2013, the Catalan Parliament passed a declaration of sovereignty stating that the people of Catalonia have, by reason of democratic legitimacy, the character of a sovereign political and legal entity. This was overturned by the Spanish Constitutional Court in May 2013, a few months later. After the Catalan Parliament passed a consultation law in September 2014 and set the day for a non-binding consultation on November 9, 2014, just 25 years after the fall of the Berlin Wall. Again, the Constitutional Court overturned the law based on the Spanish Constitution, saying that the Spanish state is indissoluble. The Catalan law made clear that referendums would be non-binding consultations, but this was emphatically refused anyway. We decided that we had to carry out the will of the Catalan people, so a vote was held using volunteers instead of civil servants, and allowing on-the-spot registration for the electoral lists. The Spanish government employed various measures to prevent the participatory process, having the Constitutional Court suspended and pressuring school directors not to open the schools on Sunday to be used as polling stations. Nevertheless, and under duress, out of a voting population of 5.4 million, 2.3 million Catalans still managed to cast their ballots, with an 81% majority voting in favor of independence. I, my Vice President, and the Minister of Education were all charged with disobedience for violating a court order, misusing public funds, breaching our public duties, and usurpation of powers for holding this non-binding peaceful vote. Unbelievable, but true. As you can see, we are up against implacable opposition. Since the Spanish government still refuses to allow a referendum, and our people have been calling for one for years, I have no other option left but to call early regional elections and to use them as a plebiscite on independence. Parties in favor of independence will share a common platform item, making it clear that if you vote for them, you are in favor of Catalonia entering a transitional period to independence after the vote. As I said, we are willing to talk and have always been open to negotiation with the Spanish government in Madrid. This remains the situation today. But unfortunately, their approach seems to be to keep their heads buried in the sand while issuing statements that use dubious legal arguments about what they cannot discuss the subject, when the issue, as you said, Xavier, Sala-i-Martin, is not a legal one, but a political one. It is wrong to deny us our democratic right to self-determination. It is not just, and it is not even sensible. On September 25th, 2012, President Barack Obama spoke about self-determination, saying that we believe freedom and self-determination are not unique to one culture. They are universal values. In preparation for the September plebiscitary elections in Catalonia, we are also taking the first steps towards creating the state structures and tools we will need should there be a majority of votes in favor of independence. There will also be a new constitution, many new laws, and public organizations to set up, which all require time and effort. We will need a tax authority, a national bank, supervisory bodies for the stock exchange, port, airport, and railway management authorities, a justice administration, a diplomatic corps, an intelligence service, and a means to defend our territorial waters, coastline, and borders. The terms of separation would have to be negotiated, and there will then be complex work to disentangle Catalan and Spanish institutions and interests, and set up all the institutions of a separate state. This won't happen immediately, as the complicated process of separating, setting up the institutions of an independent state, and establishing our place in the world will take some time. There will be extensive negotiations with the Spanish government, but also with the international organizations of which Catalonia wishes to become a member. Finally, what would an independent Catalonia look like beyond the basic state structures and tools? It would be the 16th most populous European Union country out of 29 member states. In the United States, we would be the 13th most populous state, between Virginia and Washington state. Catalonia has a higher GDP than Finland and Ireland. With only 16% of the Spanish population, we make up a quarter of Spanish exports and also a quarter of Spanish foreign tourism. We are a land of creative and innovative business and commercial entrepreneurs. Barcelona is a smart city, and we have become a regional technology hub, a kind of Silicon Valley for Southern Europe. We are the second region in Europe with the most research grants. More than 5,500 foreign companies operate in Catalonia, and we play a leading role in attracting foreign companies to Spain and Europe. We would be good neighbors, reliable allies, and a net contributor to the European budget. In fact, we have been net contributors to the European budget since Spain joined the European Union in 1986. We also do not bear ill will of any other nations, least of all Spain. The historical, cultural, and family ties are too deep. Geography has bound us together, and we will always remain Spain's friends. But what we have now doesn't work. We do not say that Spain has to be the way the Catalans want it to be. It doesn't make sense. Spain should be how it wants to be, and Catalonia should be how Catalans want it to be. To each his own, without imposing on the other. On the international relations front, I have said many times that Catalonia would be a reliable partner, assuming immediately and fully our international obligations. What Catalonia is seeking is nothing more than joining efforts with the free nations of the world to tackle today's challenges and to shape together our common future. Our commitment with a just and peaceful world stems from our history, our principles, and our aspirations. We are eager to contribute in Europe, united under the European Union umbrella, as elsewhere, working with and through the United Nations system to make such vision a reality. Catalonia believes in multilateralism and is willing to contribute to its proper functioning. From the design and implementation of the agreements around the post-2015 agenda to the challenges of climate change, sustainable development, and the promotion of human rights. Our country is ready to prove our commitment and our capacity to provide a substantive contribution to the international community. Catalonia is called to become an anchor of stability, not only of financial stability, creativity, and economic growth in the Iberian Peninsula and the south of Europe, but also an anchor of stability in terms of security, as well as social and intercultural coexistence in the west of the Mediterranean. And we would also, of course, reaffirm our commitment to our partner across the Atlantic, the United States of America. Catalonia and the United States relationship is nearly as long as the United States has existed. In fact, it was President John Adams who created the first American consulate in Barcelona. That happened in 1797, more than 200 years ago. This was one of America's first consulates abroad. In doing so, his priority was to promote relations between the young American democracy and Catalonia, and the capital town, Barcelona. Today, the United States and Catalonia do some $5 billion of trade annually. And because America is a priority, Catalonia has had an institutional president in the United States in 1989, just after the recovery of the autonomy, the political autonomy, starting with a commercial office in New York, and over time has expanded to 2 delegations in both New York and Washington, which handle institutional affairs, trade and investment, tourism and cultural and language promotion, and additional commercial offices in Miami and in Silicon Valley. The current U.S. President, Barack Obama, said in his very moving speech in Selma, Alabama, last month, that the most powerful word in democracy is we. We, the people, is the start of the United States Constitution. We shall overcome was the anthem of America's civil rights movement. Yes, we can was how your president urged Americans to vote for him. We in Catalonia also believe in the power of we in democracy. We will vote in September, and we will decide our own political future as a nation. Thank you very much for your attention.